Okay, good morning, everybody. For those of you who are just coming in, we're going to give it just a moment here before we begin our first session of AAAM 2020. Welcome. Okay, everybody, welcome all to the 2020 AAAM Student Symposium. My name is Scott Gazik. I'm an associate professor at Wake Forest University, and I am co-chairing the Student Symposium this year along with Julie Mansfield of Ohio State Medical Center. We just want to welcome you all to this kickoff for our AAAM week. I know it's an unusual year. We all would like to be in person and to enjoy each other's company and catch up like we do every year. But nonetheless, I think we have a very exciting program of talks both today and throughout the week. I'm very excited to be able to kick off AAAM Week 2020 with our Student Symposium. So with that, we'll just welcome you all. This is the 12th annual Student Symposium. We want to thank our sponsor, Nissan Motor Company, for allowing us to do this. It could not be done without your support. I want to acknowledge again my co-chair, Julie Mansfield from Ohio State University College of Medicine, and also acknowledge our student program subcommittee members, Danny Perez-Rapella and Hamid Judaki of UVA. Also want to give a quick shout out to our session chairs who volunteered their time today, as well as our students and mentors for preparing our nice slate of talks. This year's Student Symposium has 17 talks from 10 institutions. We have the logos here to the right. We have students who are seeking 5 degrees from BS to MS, MPH, MD, PhD, and PhD, representing 4 countries. The talks today will be given in 5 sessions. This is the keynote session. We're going to kick things off, and then we have injury prediction models and motorcycle safety coming up next, followed by experimental biomechanics, vehicle modeling and child restraint systems, and finally driver behavior and vulnerable road users. Just a little bit of an overview of our symposium. The session details are on the web at the link here at AAAM.org. Click on annual conference and then conference schedule. So you can see the full rundown of talks. We'll do our best to stick to time today. So those times, I know a lot of folks may be kind of working in other things. So we should be just about on time, hopefully. Our speaker slots are 10 minutes. Kind of short, but we have a lot of content, and we're trying to get it in throughout just kind of the early part of the day today on the eastern coast of the U.S. time zone. I know we have folks calling in from all over. We'll have 7 minutes for presentation and 3 minutes for live Q&A. Breaks are going to be at the following times here, and all of these times are Eastern. I do want to note that even though we're not in the same room today, we really do encourage questions, and we want to have that aspect of the conference, and I think we will certainly be able to do that. In your Zoom window, you'll see that there is a Q&A button here and a chat button, and you're encouraged to use that Q&A button to type in questions that you have for the speaker. You can upvote questions. If you see a question that you had the same one, you can click the little thumbs up here, and the moderators will be more likely to ask that question. And then you can use the chat feature just to contact or to discuss with attendees or just catch up with folks. A couple notes. There's always opportunities available for participating in AAAM student program activities. Please do reach out. Probably a great way to do that is through this info@AAAM.org, and we can get you kind of connected to the right folks. You just received, for all of you registered, received an email about speaker evaluations. Please use those and do evaluate or fill out your evaluations throughout the day. Those will go towards awards. And then if you're a Twitter user, please use the hashtag AAAM Live Online as we as we communicate through social media this year. And that finally brings us to the keynote address. This is going to be given by John Humm of the Medical College of Wisconsin, who was AAAM's 2019 Scholars Program awardee. The mission of the AAAM Scholars Program is to encourage new and original research on topics of interest to the AAAM and to foster the next generation of automotive transportation safety researchers. John's keynote talk is entitled Experimental Biomechanics, Pathological Paranoia, and Being the One Who Gets to Push the Button, which I think is a fabulous talk title. I'm really excited for it. And I also want to give John a quick plug for his talk on his short communication on Wednesday, October 15th at 4. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and you can kick it off.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, oh good. Everybody can see it, or you can see it, Scott? Okay, so thanks a lot. What you can see here, this picture is actually downtown Portland, where we were all supposed to be, and unfortunately, we had to change our plans. So this talk is going to be largely about my career as an experimental biomechanics working at MCW for the past 20 or so years, and also kind of the internal debate I had about leaving the lab and trying to pursue a PhD. So a lot of people have asked me, you know, you're good in the lab, why don't you pursue an advanced degree? And really it always came down to, and the response I would always give is that I wanted to be the one that pushed the button. So this is, what you're seeing here is a picture of our vehicle crash lab control board, and this is kind of the start button that launches the car that you know, will cause the crash. And that's something that I always enjoyed doing. And so, you know, just being at the medical college, we have a lot of unique facilities, and it's allowed me to do a wide variety of experimental biomechanics tests, such as full-scale vehicle crash tests, sled tests, piston tests, drop tests, pendulum tests, and I've always really enjoyed that, being in the lab. But I knew that if I went to pursue a PhD, is that, you know, like all things, it would change. And so it'd take me out of the lab, and that was kind of always the internal debate that I had, is once you get a job as a PhD, you're kind of out of the lab, and you have to write grants and write papers. And so this is one of the things that I always ask people, you know, that come to our lab as students is, why do you want to get a PhD? You know, make sure that you know before you get the degree what your next job is going to entail. So I think that's important. So just some brief background about myself. I did an undergrad at Marquette, and I pursued a degree in biomechanical engineering. And so at the time I went to Marquette, my senior year, when I went to go on a tour, I had hurt my knee playing football. And I was on crutches, and I went to go listen to a talk about biomechanical engineering, and they talked all about injury biomechanics, and that really kind of perked my interest, just because of the, you know, the fact that I'd hurt my knee, and I was always really good in math and science, and I wanted to do engineering. So that's why I just kind of randomly selected biomechanical engineering. And then my senior year, I got the opportunity to work in at orthopedic surgery at the medical college in the gait lab there. And we saw a lot of kids there with cerebral palsy, and analyzed their motion patterns and tried to recommend surgeries to the surgeons. And then I went on to graduate school at Marquette. And then while there, I actually worked in the lab that I do right now, analyzing 3D cervical spine motion. And after grad school, I got to work at Shriners Hospital for Children in their gait lab. So I was debating back and forth about going to med school or not. And Shriners was just a fantastic place to work. You know, everybody thinks of Shriners as these old guys that ride around in tricycles in parades, but they do a lot more than that. They donate their time to these kids, and they bring them in from all around the country. And it's just a great place to work, because all the care was free for the kids, and just everything was about the kids. So I loved that place. But I kind of wanted to do something a little more dynamic in terms of testing. And I'd heard that a job opened up back in Milwaukee at MCW Neurosurgery, where I work now. And so I applied and got the job there, and worked in the crash lab for a few years, but wanted to keep going on and do more research. So I transitioned over to the sled lab, and that's where I started doing a lot more cadaver work. And that's kind of where I am right now. So I don't want to get too far before thanking and recognizing the three main mentors that I've had at MCW, just fantastic guys. So it's Dr. Maiman, Dr. Pintar, and Dr. Yoganandan. And these guys really kind of helped shape my career. So Dr. Maiman, he was the department chairman at neurosurgery. He was a neurosurgeon. And, you know, one day he came into my office and he said, "You're really good in the lab, but you need to think more longer term." And so I think that he told me, "I think you have the leadership and the ability to get your PhD." And he's like, "I'm not going to offer it again, but if you want to go, the department will fund you." And so he really kind of provided me the kick in the butt that I needed to, you know, to pursue a PhD. And I never would have done it without his encouragement. And so the other two, Dr. Pintar and Yoganandan, these are the guys that I've worked for over 20 years. And I could talk all day and I have nothing but great things to say about them. So they really have a unique relationship. People ask me, you know, who's your boss over at MCW? And it's always been both of them. So they always know, they share grants. There's never, I never actually knew who was the PI of a certain grant. In fact, I remember talking to Dr. Pintar about a grant that we had from the FAA. And I finally saw some of the official paperwork when I was in his office, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Yo was actually the PI in this." And he's like, "Yeah, and that's just how we work, you know." And so one of my favorite stories about these two, and this is kind of cements my image of them, is they attended a briefing at NHTSA. So it was one of those fly in from Milwaukee, give the briefing, fly back. So it was a long day, and they were coming back, you know, from the airport in DC, and Dr. Pintar was on this. I apologize for the crude drawing here, but this kind of sets up the image. Dr. Pintar was on the moving walkway, and Yoga was right next to him, and they were debating about some type of you know, scientific question that came up. And this is something they always do in the hallways. And Yoga is known for being a very fast walker, and he was actually able to keep up with Dr. Pintar as they argued on the people mover. And so that kind of gives you an idea of their relationship and the way they always work. So this is a picture of actually one of the first crash tests I did. And, you know, we were a small crew then, and it was really great. It was a great opportunity for me because I got to do everything from this, you know, from certifying the dummies to setting up all the accelerometers on the car to loading all the film cameras and writing the reports and processing the data. So I really got a lot of tech and engineering work, and it was a great experience for me. And a lot of people ask me, you know, what goes through your mind when you crash these cars? And in fact, a reporter happened to be interviewing Dr. Pintar in his office or in the lab. And I happened to be in the lab when the interview was going on. And the reporter turned to me and just out of the blue asked, "Well, John, what goes through your mind when you first crash the car?" And sometimes I have a problem with being a little too honest. And so I just said, I gave exactly what went through my head, which was first time I did it, I was like, "Holy yes, I can't believe they're going to let me crash this brand new car." And I remember that was the exact thought I had. So thankfully, this reporter had a lot more professionalism in class than I did. And he changed it, he modified it to "holy cow." So some people might complain that they've been misquoted in the newspaper, but I'm actually grateful that he did, because, you know, worst case, I sound like Carrie Perry, but you know what, I'm a Chicago guy, and I can live with that. Okay, so let's get to it. This is the probably the most complicated and experimental test that I've ever run at MCW, and I'll get into the details in a second. So what this is a standard side impact test. So it represents your classic T-bone. This is the movable deformable barrier, MDB, and it crashes into the side of the car at 38.5 miles an hour. But what made this particular test so complicated is that not only do we have one cadaver in the driver's seat, but we had a second cadaver in the left rear passenger seat. So if you ever had any experience with a cadaver test, or maybe you haven't, doing one of these, one cadaver is a job in itself, but doing two at the same time is something that I had never done. And having them inside, typically we do cadaver tests on a sled where the environment's a little more controlled, and this was inside, a full-scale vehicle crash test, which made it complicated. And then further complicating thing is just the sheer volume of channels we had. So this is chest bands that we wrap around each occupant. So we're 3 of them, and they can measure the thorax time deflection history. But just each of those has 59 channels. So we had 3 of those on both occupants. We had strain gauges on the ribs that we mounted to the ribs, instrumentation on the spine, instrumentation in the car. So we had over, I don't know, I'd say 500 channels or so, which is quite a lot to pack into an onboard test system. And the other thing that complicated it too is that it was nice because we got to work with VRTC in this project, but we were borrowing some of their DAS. So it was a lot of unknowns and a lot of complicated setup. So just to get an appreciation, this is the right front passenger space. So we actually removed the seat there, and you can see our DAS was mounted to the floor and all the cables there. And then this is the right rear passenger space. So the cadaver's up here. All the cables here. And then what I'm not showing is the trunk. Actually, we had more instrumentation packed in there, and it was just as garbled as you see here. The other thing is we also, because this was just a once in a lifetime type test, is we had several onboard videos. So we had a hood, the standard door positions, but then we had one mounted to the roof of the car and one on the dash cam so that we could get, kind of an oblique view of the occupant. So it was a lot of instrumentation and a lot of details, and we only have, one chance to get it right. So this slide is going to kind of show kind of the way I approach cadaver tests, and in this one in particular. So this is kind of a timeline where, over here kind of represents me first, when we first find out that we're going to run this test, and this would actually be the actual impact or the moment of the event. And so really how it starts for me is that I go into it gets back to that panic. I go into initial panic thinking like, man, we're never going to be able to do this. I can think of essentially everything that can go wrong. And these are the things that keep me up at night, especially, when we're a few weeks out from the test. I think of, triggers failing, data loss, all things like that. And then somewhere after, as we get closer to the test, we start compiling the solutions. How are we going to overcome these things that might likely go wrong so that we can collect this data? And then what we do is we put that into the solution, into our detailed checklist that we all fill out. And so, figuring out the things that likely go wrong, figuring out those solutions, incorporating them into detailed checklists kind of helps you get ready and get prepared for the test. And then the last thing we do is that we practice. So especially for this test, I had like 5 different people doing data acquisition just because of I was trying to mitigate the potential data loss. So, at worst, maybe we'd lose some of the data, but not the most important data. So several days before the test, we just drilled and drilled and drilled. We practiced arming the systems, triggering them, downloading, because I wanted everybody to be comfortable with their particular role. And that really is kind of what gives me, as we approach a test, gives me confidence. It gives our team confidence. So going into test day, you just know you're going to come and encounter problems. It's just part of running experimental tests and particularly cadaver tests. But there comes a point where I know we're going to have problems, but I know that we'll be able to solve them. And sometimes, when we're several hours out and it looks like we're going to run at midnight, I'll be like, man, I wish it was like 6 hours from now. I don't know how we're going to overcome all these problems, but I know we will. And I know in 6 hours, I'll be at home sleeping. But I got to be honest, no matter what, no matter how much we've prepped, when it comes to actually running the test, the few seconds right before, I'm always a little nervous and I'm always a little panicked. But I think it's a healthy dose, and it kind of keeps me on edge and makes sure that as a team we succeed. So these are just I'm kind of wrapping it up here. These are the things that I've learned throughout my career as experimental biomechanics and as a PhD student, is have a clear idea. This is what I'd recommend to some of you guys, is have a clear idea what you want in terms of your career. So, if you like working in a lab or something like that, maybe a PhD right now isn't a good choice, but you know what? You can always go back and do it later. I mean, I'm a good example of that. There's time to do it. So find a place or group that lets you be yourself. Now you're always going to have to, have some sort of societal norms, right? But I'm kind of an odd duck, and I know Frank and Yoga are probably watching this, rolling their eyes at some of the things I've said, but they've kind of let me be me, and it's really made me happy, and I enjoy working here. So this is from actually Yoga's dad, and Yoga and his dad told it to him, and Yoga always tells this to me, and it's do things with your whole heart. And so another way of saying is how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're going to do it, you're going to do your work, put everything you have into it, because people are always going to be evaluating you, always be judging you, and just, be aware of what you're putting out there. So for me, it's important to be confident, but not arrogant. So to me, arrogant is just the assumption or the entitlement that things are going to go right. All right. Confidence is you've prepped, you've got, the humility to know that things are going to go wrong, but you've prepped and you've done the best you can, and that you're prepared and you're ready for whatever comes your way. The other thing is we, not I. So whenever I give a talk, I'm always like to say we, because it's always about everybody in our lab. And Yoga's trying to prep me, because I give my dissertation in a couple of weeks, and he's been telling me, you got to say I, because PhDs are supposed to be your work. But I think my committee's going to have to live with that, because I just can't. It's so ingrained in me. And I think this is important, because I think everybody in our lab is important, from the PhDs to the techs to the machinist to the guy that cleans the lab. And you can't have success without a group effort. So everybody has a role to play, and everybody's important. And the last thing is, this is particularly important to me, is something I relish, is being the calm in the storm. So outside of work, I officiate football, high school and D3 college. And so I always like that feeling, and I thrive on that feeling that, coaches and players and fans might be yelling at me, screaming at me, or, at a tense point in the game, or, I come into the lab and there's a lot of things wrong, and people are always, might be in a little bit of a panic. And I like being able to walk in, and I feel like the more tense things get, the calmer I am, and the more I'm able to kind of detach and go through and solve that problems. And I like that. And this is, I'm not a poet by any means, but this is actually my favorite poem. It's by Rudyard Kipling, and it's called If, but there's a lot of good things in there if you ever get a chance to read it. But if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming you, right, then you'll be an adult. I crossed out man. But so I think that's always kind of rung true to me, and something I've enjoyed. So I've talked a lot, and so thanks to AAAM and the AAAM Scholars Committee for giving this opportunity. Of course, all the staff at MCW, you guys are like family, all the teachers at Marquette. And then this is my email and my phone number. So if you guys have any questions about experimental biomechanics, you ever want to reach out, need advice, I'm more than happy to talk about it. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John. Very, very nicely done. Great way to kick off today's session. I really enjoyed it. I was looking in the Q&A, and I think folks are just kind of coming to grips with the new technology. So I'm going to go ahead and ask a question here. And for those of you who have questions for John, you saw his contact information. Please do reach out. John, what do you think is something that you can take from the lab and now move into your next stage of your career? That I really identify with a lot of what you wrote there, like sort of like healthy paranoia. But can you think of something that maybe to share with the students who are maybe a couple years behind you in the process, what you feel like you'll take with you mostly for the next stage?
Yeah, I think for me, it's having a real good understanding of what it takes to run the experiments that we do and run the programs that we do. So Yoga and Frank were always really good at that. They knew, because they were in the labs themselves. That's something that I learned from them. But you gotta be realistic about the time that's involved, and there's no such thing. No matter how easy an experiment may seem, there's no such thing as an easy experiment. It always takes 2 or 3 times longer than you'd initially think, and also, it's all the prep work that goes in, and the things that I'm going to demand from the people now that are going to take my place is that, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you're never going to have time to go back and do it again, right? So always make sure that the data that you're collecting, you do some type of real world check so that you have confidence in your data, and I think those are some of the important things.
All right, excellent. I'm going to squeeze in just one more, if you would take this one quickly, because it got upvoted a couple times. A
Sure.
lot of the folks are asking, would you characterize your career as a series of kind of decisive plans, or just sort of taking those opportunities as they presented themselves to you? And if you could, in just maybe a minute.
Oh, no, it's definitely just been as opportunities come my way. So I feel very fortunate. I'd love to say that, this was a story of like overcoming great obstacles, but that's just not true at all. The fact is, I've been set up very well by Frank and Yoga to succeed. And, I've been in a great place and working with great people. So I'm very fortunate.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody. Virtual round of applause for John. We really appreciate you coming out this morning and kind of sharing your thoughts, and we'll now turn it to the next session.
Thank you.
Emily and